Hi, my name is Havilah Gianetta, and I'm running a GoFundMe campaign for a book that I've been working on for years. And tonight I'm going to read a third excerpt from my book as part of my GoFundMe update. So I mentioned briefly in my GoFundMe spiel that there are mystical elements in my book. There's a range of how those mystical elements affect the plot, but tonight I'm just going to read about one of my earliest dreams that I had about God. I think I was about 13 years old when this happened. Just to note, every section of my book starts with a quote, and I'm choosing Genesis 17, verse 1. Specifically, I want to focus on the name El Shaddai. It's usually translated in English as God Almighty, but the root word Shaddai could mean many things. It was written thousands of years ago in ancient Hebrew. It could mean mountain, as in God of the mountain. It could mean destroyer, as in God the destroyer. Or it could be translated as breasts, as in I, even I, am omnipotent God of many breasts. So I want to focus on this one tonight, this particular translation. I think that you could translate Shaddai as any of those three, and it would be pretty comprehensive if you're talking about an infinite God who has both masculine and feminine energy. I also include footnotes in the book, which I can't really do in the excerpt. But I just want to note that in his article, The God with Breasts, El Shaddai in the Bible, a scholar named David Biel points out that that title, El Shaddai, is used 6 times in the book of Genesis. And 5 of those times, it's specifically used in connection with a fertility blessing. So again, I think there's good reason to kind of assign the meaning of God of the many breasts, and it definitely applies to the dream that I had about God in this excerpt. All right, let's begin. I, even I, am omnipotent God of many breasts. Genesis 17:1. I swayed gently, almost as if I were being carried, and opened my eyes. A gigantic woman walked past me in a forest, naked. She stood almost as tall as the treetops, her colossal muscles flexing beneath her pale skin with every step she took. A thick blanket of chestnut-colored hair fell down her back, and her right arm was raised, coddling something small against her breasts. I moved closer. It was a tiny baby, a caramel-toned newborn swaddled in a soft blanket, with a few wisps of hair on its head, its eyes barely open. Drink, a heavy voice reverberated. A shiver of fear ran through me. That voice. It was the same voice I'd heard in my very first vision, like thunder rippling through an earthquake. For months I'd been aching to hear God speak to me again, but as the terrifying voice shook my body, I wasn't sure that I wanted to be quite this close to it. And why did the voice say, drink? Suddenly I was peering up into the giant's face. Her features were too broad and wide to be human, but something about her pale olive skin, dark tresses, and green eyes seemed vaguely familiar. She bent her head toward me, and when she moved closer I recognized why. I was looking into the face of my own mother, or something uncannily like it. The resemblance was unmistakable, but the giant's massive irises were evergreen, much darker than any humans could be, and also hollow. Looking into them felt like falling into a sea of bottomless fir trees, like they might drown me if I stared at them too long. The giant smiled. I tried to turn away, but her gaze moved closer, penetrating, consuming. I wanted her to stop watching me, but I couldn't move or speak or even turn my head. And finally I realized I was the newborn baby in her arms. All I could do was blink. The giant's overpowering smile grew wider. Drink, she repeated. I gaped at her, overwhelmed. I'd only seen the echo of her expression once, years before, during one of Idlebrook's field trips to some local museum. I'd been wandering through the exhibition with my classmates when a strange statue caught my eye. It was a sculpture of a growling canine, her razor-sharp fangs frozen in a silent snarl as she glared down from her pedestal, ready to pounce. I'd seen depictions of menacing animals before, but what made this one so unusual was that underneath her sinewy ribs crouched two human toddlers, straining to suckle milk from the teats where her own cubs should have been. It would be years before I read the legend about the mythical twins Romulus and Remus and the Capitoline wolf. All I knew in that moment was that I was looking at a fiercer image of motherhood than the ones I'd observed in family portraits or commercials for baby formula. The jarring contrast of the ferocious fangs above the helpless children struck an unsettling chord in me. They were a primal symbol of danger, nurture, and sacrifice, all rolled up into one life-giving being. But that was just a sculpture. And now, as I stared up into the unearthly face with its everlasting eyes, I understood that she wasn't just a symbol or reflection of motherhood. She was the source. "Drink," God rumbled again. Unnerved, I shifted my baby's head back to the pale breast against my face and began to nurse. There was no taste, no wetness from her nipple, only a nourishing heat that flooded my spirit. Liquid life. I glanced up at God's face again while I fed, conforming easily into her divine warmth like a small sack of pudding. Why? I wondered as I began to sink out of the dream and back into sleep. Why would God make himself look like a mother? My mother. God is my mother. Deep-de-dee, 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 de-dee. I started awake as my Mickey Mouse alarm clock blared out its morning wake-up call. "Oh, shut up!" I groaned as I reached up to slam the clock's off button, accidentally knocking it down from my nightstand instead. All right, that was the third excerpt. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to contribute to the GoFundMe, I will put the details below this video, and I will upload my fourth excerpt sometime later this week.